From the identity of the Gloam-Eyed Queen to Marika's seduction and betrayal, I've got some answers for you today that I haven't heard anybody else talk about. So strap yourselves in, friends, settle down with a flask of crimson tears, because I am confident that I have solved some of the biggest mysteries in Elden Ring, and I am not joking. Hey all you heroes out there, I'm your professional protagonist and welcome back to Hell Yeah Gaming, where I am diving headfirst into theory crafting for the first time. I mean, in the past I've certainly reacted to and analyzed trailers, gave my predictions and hypotheses and whatnot, but as far as sitting down with all of the evidence and trying to piece something together in a narratively fulfilling way, this is a first for me, so please do be gentle. But before we get into all of that, we've got to get a shout out to the commenter of the day, Max Cube Gaming. Let's give Max Cube Gaming a great big hell yeah! And if you'd like to be featured as commenter of the day, well, then all you need to do is 1. Subscribe to the channel, and 2. Leave comments on my videos and community posts. But back to the reason why you clicked on this video. You see, I was discussing the lore of Shadow of the Erdtree over Facebook Messenger with my friend Max, as we very often do. No relation to the commenter of the day, Max. And I was rambling on, again, as I often do, when I suddenly stumbled into a couple of revelations I haven't seen or heard anybody else cover. More than that, I pulled out the smoking gun that, in my own mind at least, proves these revelations, and I had to immediately begin writing the script for this video out of sheer excitement. I believe I have uncovered all of the most important mysteries surrounding Marika's early days, and placed it all into a rough timeline. So, let's get started. By now, we all know that Marika originated in the Shaman village, which was devastated by the potentates of Bonnie village on order of the Hornsent culture, so their flesh could be used in living jar rituals. The topic has been beaten to death by every lore tuber out there, so I won't harp on it. Instead, I want to focus on how we got to that point. Who could have ordered, or at the very least allowed, such a horrible practice? The Hornsent believed their horns to be a sign of divinity, a mark that they were touched by the Crucible of life itself. And as such, had one hell of a superiority complex, just like all religious zealots do. However, it's not just the horns they felt were divine. This belief extends to most, if not all, forms of mixed species traits. After defeating Mesmer the Impaler, if you summoned Hornsent, or that is the person, not the people, you know, naming a specific NPC after an entire culture doesn't get confusing at all. He comments on how Mesmer's snake form was sublime. He expresses disdain for the hypocrisy that Mesmer could seek the destruction of his people when the demigod himself was just like them. Okay, bro, so what? I can hear you asking. What does this have to do with the god of the Crucible era you promised us? Well, I'm glad you asked, my non-existent hypothetical voice in the audience. If writhing snakes are the most base of us, as Hornsent puts it, then why not a serpent as their god? It is my belief that this thing, shown to us in the story trailer, was the god of this era, and that it was the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Now hold on, put down your torches and pitchforks. I promise this isn't the big reveal of my theory, though I do have something to confirm it. Yes, I'm aware the idea that this thing is the Gloam-Eyed Queen has existed since the day the trailer came out. Tons of people were talking about how the color and texture of it looks to be the same as Godskin, and some believe it looks like a serpent's head. I was skeptical myself at first, and now I'm 100% convinced. Let's look at some basic facts. The Godskins have numerous Crucible features, from the Apostle's ability to stretch their body out like a snake, to the Noble's tail summoning. A Godskin Noble is even allied with Rykard and the God-devouring Serpent in Volcano Manor, guarding the Serpent's Amnion, an item many have already theorized to be the method by which Godskins are created. Of course, these are all things that we've heard before. I'm not exactly spouting anything new. If only there was something more concrete, something more solid, a real smoking gun, if you will. I guess the smoking greatsword will have to do! The Godslayer's greatsword isn't a new item. It's found in the Divine Tower of Caelid after a Godskin Apostle boss battle. But it does have a whole lot of new context. The item description reads, Sacred Sword of the Gloam-Eyed Queen, who controlled the Godskin Apostles before her defeat at the hands of Malekith. Additionally, the weapon's skill is called the Queen's Black Flame. There is no question that the Godslayer's greatsword belonged to the Gloam-Eyed Queen personally. So, let's take a look at the sword's shape, shall we? See it yet? It's a spiral! My good friend Max is actually the one who reminded me of the weapon when I had completely forgotten about it, so this one goes out to you, bud. In case you don't understand the implication of the spiral, or otherwise need a refresher, here it is. While in Marika's era, the Crucible is most often depicted as a great tree with intertwining branches and spreading roots, that's not how the Hornsent depicted it. They don't seem to have viewed it as a physical thing at all, but more like a metaphysical force of primordial life, which they represented with a spiral pattern. The item description of the Spira incantation tells us, superior sorcery of the Tower Priests, wielded as an incantation of the spiral. Wrap one's arms together and hold them up to the heavens to summon a spiral of light that erupts at the enemy's feet. Column of light persists for as long as the button is pressed. The spiral is a normalized Crucible current that, one day, will form a column that stretches to the gods. It is this perceived spiral the Hornsent mimicked when constructing Bellarat Tower, which houses the Gate of Divinity, the very place an Empyrean must go in order to become a true god. And look at the tip of the Godslayer's greatsword. 2 points, looking just like the Gate of Divinity. If that ain't perfect evidence, I don't know what is. Now, don't get me wrong, it's entirely possible that this thing is not the Gloam-Eyed Queen or the ruling god of the Hornsent's era. But the instant Max reminded me of the Godslayer's greatsword was the instant I became 100% convinced that the Gloam-Eyed Queen was the god of that era. Now that I've hopefully convinced you, that leads us to a natural question. The one rule that the Lands Between beats us with over and over again is that in age, in era, in order, they require 2 things: a god and their lord consort. If the Gloam-Eyed Queen was the god of this Crucible era, then who was her lord consort? Better yet, who could consort with that thing? We already have the answer. Dragonlord Placidusax. Aside from the obvious points that dragons and serpents tend to be related in many mythologies, and Placidusax's remembrance refers to him as Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree, which frankly is all the evidence I really need. There's also the matter of the Elden Ring itself. In Farum Azula, you run across this image of the Elden Ring, presumably how it looked during Placi's era as Lord. We can clearly see how the ring is quite different from the current era, and for the 2 years since the game originally came out, people have compared it to the roots of a tree. Only, knowing what we know now, that's not the most likely imagery that it's evoking, is it? Instead of tree roots, I see a series of spirals, or perhaps snakes, all converging together, intertwining toward a single point, the Crucible, where they all blend. This would also perfectly answer the question as to why there's a horde of godskins in Farum Azula, the seat of power of the Dragonlord. They're either standing guard over Placi while he's recovering from his injuries, or else were stationed there as permanent fixtures by the Gloam-Eyed Queen to protect her interests there. Of course, this is all well and good, but really we're just setting the stage for the main event. Now that we've established the background information, let's build from there, because I believe that I've uncovered what exactly is Marika's original sin, as well as her seduction and betrayal. And it's all centered around one important figure I haven't seen anybody else so much as give a single thought about. Before I reveal my conclusion, let's go over what we know about this original sin in question. Marika's people, the shaman, or shrine maidens if we're being more pedantic and translation accurate, were all but wiped out by the Hornsent because their flesh was malleable and proved crucial in the creation of their living jars. While this process of melding flesh together was considered to be a blessing to the criminals made into saints, likely owing to the blending of flesh being seen as symbolic of the Crucible, all evidence points to the recipients of this treatment finding it abhorrent. Marika had absolutely no love for the Hornsent, and in all likelihood it was her own vengeance that served as the primary motivation for her actions going forward. How then does one betray a group which they feel nothing but loathing? The only reasonable conclusion is that Marika had to bide her time, and use that time to build a relationship with the Hornsent and their god. After all, if Marika was hostile from the get-go, they would have no reason to consider her later actions a betrayal. With a powerful god who wielded the flame of destined death, children who skinned her rival gods, the mightiest of the dragons as her Elden Lord, and all his brood, the Gloam-Eyed Queen was far too much to usurp without the right resources and opportunity. Luckily, that opportunity would present itself in the form of Curse You, Baal! One day, Baal the Dread attempted to kill Placidusax, causing both to suffer grave wounds from the battle, and Placidusax proceeded to remove himself from the natural flow of time in order to recover. Now, I am not saying that Marika orchestrated this event personally. There's zero evidence to support an alliance between herself and Baal. What I am saying is that the Dread's attempted coup presented the then Empyrean with the perfect opportunity. With Placidusax, the Lord Consort of the then current god, removed from the table, Marika was able to reveal the rest of her pieces on the board. As we all know, it was her Empyrean shadow, Malekith, who destroyed the Gloam-Eyed Queen on Marika's behalf. But a revolution is not won with a single soldier, no matter how mighty he be. And we saw the bodies Marika left in her wake at the gates of divinity. That's a lot of dead dudes. While I suppose it's possible Marika herself killed all those Hornsent, it would make much more sense for her to have built up her own forces. And those forces needed a leader, one who wouldn't raise any suspicion. More than that, This was the moment that Marika ascended from Empyrean to full-fledged god. The moment she founded her Golden Order. The moment she created the Erdtree. What is the true nature of her seduction and betrayal? Once again, I have to reiterate, if there is one rule Elden Ring beats us with over and over again, it's the rule of two. For an order to exist, it must have both a god and a lord consort. Enter Horaloo, warrior. While rambling about my theories to Max, it had suddenly struck me. Marika needed her first Elden Lord, Godfrey, on her ascension, and yet there hadn't been a single mention of him by either of his names in the DLC. As a result, I think the theorizing and lore community as a whole just sort of forgot about him and his importance, forgot to include him. But according to the rules of the setting, he had to have been there and involved in some way. The only way I can reconcile this gross oversight is if we already have all the information provided to us in the base game needed. Now that we have the additional lore of the DLC to recontextualize it. According to the Crucible Knights set, the Crucible Knights served Godfrey, the first Elden Lord. And of course, Godfrey is simply the name that was granted to the warrior Horaloo to befit his new lordly station. Therefore, it is my theory, a theory which I personally believe to be canon, but is still just a theory, that Horaloo lived within the Hornsent's rule as one of their mightiest commanders. Perhaps his men were not yet the Crucible Knights as we would later know them. In particular, the tree imagery, I imagine, was Marika's own rebranding of the Crucible in her order's early years. But they were still among the mightiest warriors of the Crucible era. And under their commander's orders, they turned on and betrayed the Gloam-Eyed Queen. That is Marika's seduction. She seduced the warrior Horaloo with the promise of being her lord consort so that he could wage war with the rest of the lands between, fulfilling the lust for battle he craved. That is Marika's betrayal. She bided her time, sowing rebellion into the ranks of the Crucible's own forces, then usurped the established rule when the opportunity presented itself. That is Marika's original sin. She destroyed the God and the Crucible Order to ascend to the gates of divinity. On a sacrifice of the holy people she would go on to build her own order from. With that all in mind, here's how I imagine the timeline of events playing out. The Hornsent discover the shaman village and begin the persecution that leaves the village essentially lifeless. At some point during all of this, Marika is approached by the Two Fingers, or perhaps even Meter herself, and chosen to be an Empyrean. Naturally, she's provided with her Empyrean shadow, Malekith, who proves himself to be an unstoppable monster in battle. Whether because she's too much trouble to capture for the jars, too powerful to kill with the Godskinners, or she hides her Newman shaman heritage, Marika is left alone by the Hornsent and allowed to mingle with their ranks. She becomes a powerful ally. Unbeknownst to them, this is all an act as she bides her time. Marika seduces Horaloo with the promise of power and an unending war, something he is all too eager to join in on. He gets his Crucible Knights, or the group that would eventually become the Crucible Knights, as well as any other soldiers loyal to his command, to join. Eventually, by a stroke of luck, the Elden Lord Placidusax is injured during an altercation with Baal the Dread, allowing Marika the perfect time to strike. Horaloo and his knights battle the Hornsent forces whilst Malekith slays the Gloam-Eyed Queen. Marika takes the Elden Ring from her body and ascends to godhood on the sacrifice of all those killed in the name of her Golden Order. She names Hoaralou her Lord Consort and bestows upon him the name Godfrey, then sends him and his army south to Limgrave, the Weeping Peninsula, and Caelid to wage war and bring the territories into her order. She creates the Erdtree, and with it the Shadow Tree, which removes the Hornsent capital from the lands between and shunts it into its own pocket dimension. While Godfrey is busy kicking ass across the southern stretches of the continent, Marika sends Radagon, her other half, but maybe not yet her other half, to conquer Liurnia. Of course, Liurnia does not fall to war, leading to a stalemate and eventually the civil union between Radagon and Queen Renala, sealing Liurnia's assimilation through politics. Finally, Godfrey leads the forces of the Golden Order north to the mountaintops of the Giants, where they waged the final war to unite all the lands between under Marika's Golden Order. As soon as the Giants were wiped out to all but the last man, Marika took her grace from Godfrey and others, creating the Tarnished, and banished them, while Radagon was waiting in the wings to step up as the second Elden Lord. Because, say it with me everyone, an order requires both a god and a lord consort. Sometime after the banishing of the Tarnished, Marika tasked Mesmer with leading a conquest to the Shadowlands, which eventually kicks off the story of the DLC. And that's all I've got for you today. Whew! Are you convinced? Tell me why or why not in the comments below, and remember, just because I'm confident that I've solved the DLC doesn't mean you have to take it as gospel. I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. If this theory interested you, then check out my Fallout crossover playthrough where I burn down the lands between as Confessor Cromwell for the Children of Atom. Either way, the story presented to us in Shadow of the Erdtree deserves itself a great big hell yeah!